Well, good afternoon and hello again. Today I'd like to talk about the most obnoxious person I have ever met. And this happened back in the Bahamas, I don't know, late 90s or something like that. There's a harbor in the southern part of the Bahamas in the Exumas called Georgetown. And at certain times of the year they have either a lot of cruising boats in there that are transiting north and south, or a lot of people, they take their boats from Florida and that's as far south as they go. But there's good provisions and typically a party atmosphere there in the winter months. And we had stopped there on our way down to the Caribbean. And again, you meet all kinds of people when you're doing this. And I think it was the English guy we met. He was an older man that was living on his boat by himself, and those guys sometimes attract the girls for, like wives. They'll want to come over and, you know, clean their boat or take care of them a little bit. You know, he's probably in his 60s or something like that. So when we were over there, he goes, "Hey, my future son-in-law," or whatever, his daughter was on a boat with another guy in the same harbor. And this guy had sailed the boat from England down to Africa, over to South America, and was up in the Caribbean and in the Bahamas at this time. And he goes, "Yeah, you know, she's traveling with a Scotsman. And they're not married, but she has a kid, and they're on this big boat." And he says, "We're all getting together tonight for some cocktails. Come on over." So basically, he invited me over to this boat, not the owner. So we get on the boat that night, and it's a pretty big boat. I'm going to say 50-some foot long. So it's got a big cockpit in it. There's a bunch of people there, probably 8 or 10 of us. And this guy has a problem with me because I'm an American. I'm a Yank. And he's just like, he's insulting me flat out again and again and again. And that's all right. I can take my knocks. So eventually I let him go on for a while because it was his boat. And I looked at him and I said, "Hey," I said, "my geography is pretty bad." I said, "Can you help me out? Like, where exactly is Scotland, you know, inside of England? I know you're somewhere inside of England, but I'm not exactly sure where Scotland's located." And he blew a fuse. I don't know if you know much about the culture, but the English and the Scots have not gotten along for years, so basically I was calling him an Englishman. And you could just see the temper in his eyes start to come up, and he started to get real upset, and then he broke this big smile and started laughing. And he goes, "Okay, I guess I had that one coming." And then things like after that were pretty calm on the boat. It really wasn't a problem. And I'm not sure if it was him or his girlfriend. His girlfriend or another girl on the boat. But, you know, typically the men all go to the front of the boat to go to the toilet when we're drinking, and the women go down and they use the head inside of the boat. And we're sitting there talking, and this girl jumps up and she runs to the front of the boat, and nobody's really paying much attention to it. And then she comes back, and she'd been sitting right next to me. And I looked at her and I'm like, "Did you just go do what I thought you did?" And she says, "Oh yeah," she says, "I pee off the front of the boat all the time." She says, "It's much easier than going down and using the toilet." And I'm like, "Tell me how you did that." And she goes, "Well, you go up there, you pull your pants down," and I'm not going to get into too many details in case there's some young ladies here, but she definitely proved that you could do that. So this Scotsman was the most obnoxious person I've ever met. So I guess it's maybe 3 or 4 years later, and I'm headed down to the Dominican Republic. I have some friends down there and hadn't seen them in a while. So my wife and I are sailing down to the Dominican Republic, and this time we're on a catamaran. And I found out that I don't like catamarans. They just beat you to death when you're going to weather, which means into the wind or into the waves. So we had a tropical system or tropical storm coming up out of the Caribbean, and we were up in the Turks and Caicos and decided it was time to run. And we couldn't make the port where my buddy was at. So I started looking at the charts, and I figured I could make the border of Haiti and the Dominican Republic, which are on the island of Hispaniola. We wanted to stay out of Haiti, but anywhere in the Dominican Republic I was happy with making landfall. So we sailed, I think it was overnight, to get down there, and we pull into the harbor, and there's absolutely no other boats there. It's not a popular place for cruising boats to go. And later on that day, I see a boat sailing. And I'm like, oh, okay, there's some other boaters here. And my wife and I at this time don't speak Spanish, hardly at all. I mean, a few words here and there, but we're not really Spanish speakers. And we're in town later on that afternoon, and I see these two Western guys sitting in the restaurant having a beer. And I'm like, oh wow, maybe one of these guys speaks Spanish, and we're having some issues with the port captain, and nothing bad, but just communication problems. And we don't have phones back then that have translators and all that on it. So I walk in and I say, hey, either one of you gentlemen possibly speak Spanish? I said, I'm on the other cruising boat. This guy looks up at me and he goes, I don't speak Spanish, but I speak real loud. And I'm just like, okay. And I just start laughing a little bit, and they're like, well, come on down and have a beer with us. So I sit down and have a beer with these guys, and they start telling about, you know, where they're coming from and where they're headed. And the guy that's really loud and obnoxious, you know, he's actually crew for the other guy. So we're going on, and I learned this guy's a Scot. And I just look at my wife and just blatantly say in front of her, I said, you know what? I've only ever met one other Scotsman in my life. And I said, he's as obnoxious as that guy is. I said, they just must all be obnoxious as hell from Scotland. Oh, and the guy thought it was funny and starts laughing, and you know, it goes on. Well, we sit there and talk for another 15 or 20 minutes, and I realize it's the same man. I'd only met him that one night in his cockpit of his boat, but after we sat there and talked a little bit, I realized it was the same guy, and he was obnoxious. We ended up becoming really good friends after that. We both sailed, well, I was on my boat and he was with the other one, and we sailed up to the port of Luperon. It's on the north coast of the Dominican Republic, where my buddy had a marina. And we hung out with him for maybe a month or so, and he became a pretty good friend of mine at that time. But oh my God, he was one obnoxious guy. So he was definitely the most obnoxious person I ever met. But ended up being a lot of fun to hang out with Annette once I got to know him. So don't remember what his name was. That was years ago. I always had a better memory for the boats that I met people on than their names. But yeah, he was quite the character. Anyway, cheers from the Philippines, and I hope everybody's doing well. Bye.